So this is the part where I say, Happy New Year! It is one of those, this is one of those times when it's somewhat arbitrary when we decide that we're going to do this, but it's a new year. And it's partially because school is starting and that's determining that things are going to be new. But this also is kind of the time of year. I know Labor Day is kind of officially the unofficial end of summer. But really school starting sets that new year, right? It says this nice long summer weekend we've been having going on where things kind of slow down for a few months theoretically, or at least maybe work settles down for a little bit, and now we're back to work, right? We're settling in for the next 9 months of things that are going on. School is happening. Everything is going to be moving now. And so now it is time for something new. For our kids, it's new clothes, new classes, new grades, maybe new buildings, new teachers, new patterns at home because summer is different. I was listening to someone this week and he was talking about in the summers they are late to bed and late to rise. This last week, their kids started school before ours do, and they're saying, we've gotten part of that down. We've gotten the change we had to make. We've gotten now the early to rise part down. We just haven't gotten the late to bed part fixed yet, right? We know that it's coming. It's this time when things are new. Some of those things are in our control. Many of them aren't. But this is just kind of the way this time of year goes. But have you ever taken a time when something new is starting like this and said, I'm going to do this, but now I am going to be a different person. I'm going to try lots of new things. Maybe fix things that are wrong or just try to do things differently a little bit. It's a natural thing to do at these times because they set themselves up to be good, to be a good time to do that. And a lot of it is because we know that there are pieces about ourselves that we want to be different. We know that we've got things about us that are not great or not right, or maybe this time it's not about us, but it's about something else going on around us. And so we say, this time, this year, it's going to be different. So we look to say, we can make something new. We look to these new things because we recognize that there are things out there that are a part of our lives that are bad and that are awful, and that we just, we don't like who we are because of them. Now, there are some things that are just bad and they're awful and we don't like them, but we can kind of work through them and we can just move on. But there are other things, though, that eat at our souls. And the difference here is that these are things that eat at our souls are things that suck our energy. They suck our energy, our emotional capacity. They suck out our desire to do anything at all, and that would be bad. But the things that eat our souls, then when they do all of that, taking away from us, then they stoke, though, our anger and our frustration, our impatience, our anxiety, to the point that those become the things that control who we are and what we do. Or at the very least, they control our thoughts so we don't think about anything else. Those are the things that eat at our souls. And so we try new things. We try new habits, changes in jobs. We try to reset expectations. All of it is in an attempt to stop the soul eating. But we have to be a little bit careful with that, though. Because sometimes we can try and do a new thing and we can get a little bit too far ahead of us. We have to remember that in the middle of this, we have to be connected to something somewhere, because there's a difference between trying something new and being lost. If we get out too far, we're no longer tethered to anything in the back and we become lost. And it's okay to be lost for a very short time as you are kind of landing into someplace new, but sometimes we can just get lost completely and we're kind of floundering until whatever happens gets us back and gets us reconnected like we need. And so we have to be careful about how far we go with anything. And this is where I like this story of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, who was a wee little man was he. He climbed up in a, thank you. I could count on you all to do that. And you're welcome now. You're going to have that song stuck in your head for the next 6 months. I know it's been a couple of times I've preached on Zacchaeus since we've been here. I just got the song out of my head 2 weeks ago. Yeah, it's going to be back now. But I like the story of Zacchaeus because we know who Zacchaeus is. It's a very short story, but it gives us everything that we need in there. We're told that he is a tax collector, and better yet, he's like the supervisor of the tax collectors. He's not just a tax collector, he's like an Uber tax collector. He is up there at the top of all of that. And so we know who he is. By definition then, well, not by definition, but by comparison that we have seen in other places, we know that tax collectors are not great people. And what happens then is Zacchaeus tries to see Jesus one day, and he meets Jesus, and he changes everything about himself because of that. And that was a big deal because of the job that he had. So here's my next question for you this morning. What did Zacchaeus do after he met Jesus and changed his ways? What did he do after that? Any ideas? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Anyone ever thought of that one before? I mean, I hadn't thought of it before. Like, what did Zacchaeus do after that? And then I was kind of upset with myself with the answer I came up with. You know what Zacchaeus probably did after he met Jesus and he changed his ways? He was probably still a tax collector. Right? Like, that doesn't fit with the story. But we're given nothing in there to tell us what he did. We're not told that he not only did he give half of everything he had back and repay folks that he took advantage of 4 times. We're not told the next part of that is not that he then went and joined the disciples and walked all around Galilee with everyone for the next couple of years. We're not told that. We're not told that he took up carpentry or shepherding. We're not told that he just took another job in the Roman administration somewhere. We're not told any of that. The basic assumption is that he went on being a tax collector. And I kind of like that one, but I don't like all the stuff that goes with it, because I think there should be more difference there, because here's the other kicker to all of this. He gives away half of what he owns, and then for anyone that he cheated, he's going to pay them back 4 times. Zacchaeus was probably still doing fine after all of that. He was probably not going to notice a huge change in his lifestyle because of everything that he gave away. He was going to be fine. He was going to notice a change in his lifestyle, but that's now because he was following Jesus. Romans liked to eat a lot. They shared a lot of meals with each other. That was a part of their culture. The biggest thing he was going to notice was that he probably didn't accept all of the same dinner invitations anymore. And when he would host dinners, he wasn't going to invite some of the same people anymore. But his life was going to be different. Even if he wasn't going to be making a lot of major changes. Outside of the philosophical questions about paying taxes, there was nothing wrong with being a tax collector. But there was something wrong in how he was doing it. Because how he was doing it was eating at his soul. Because that's how he found himself that day, someone of his importance who is also not very tall. And so, imagine this picture. You've got a street full of people here, maybe not super full, but just like enough people there that if you are a little bit vertically challenged, you're going to struggle seeing through the crowd to see this man who is walking down the street. And so you kind of see him doing that little popping up and down thing, trying to see him until finally he gets to like I see him down at the end of the corner, climbing up inside of a tree so he can see Jesus. That's not what you did when you were someone like Zacchaeus, but that's where he was. That tells us that his job, what he was doing, was eating at him. And eating at him in ways that was not good for him, that led him to that place. One of the most challenging parts of faith, not just of Zacchaeus's, but I think also of ours, is that sometimes we think that when we make a change in our lives of faith that it should be a big, giant change, that things are changing and it needs to be big and demonstrable and something big and important. But changing who we are in this way does not mean that we have to make large-scale changes in who we are to be faithful. What it means, though, is that we have to, those things that change, have to bring us back into alignment with who Jesus is And we have to use our faith to discover how we overcome these things that are eating at our souls. That's the trick. And that's hard. The book of James is often a challenge because it raises this specter of faith versus works. And this challenge of faith versus works has been something that has been ongoing. We're talking about it in James. So we're going back to the first century. It has been a part of our faith for 2,000 years. Now we have finally gotten to the point where we say, well, it shouldn't be faith versus works. And in fact, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier this week, and not even anything about this, but we were talking about James because that's what we do. And he made the comment that I really liked. He said, James really is just the commentary on Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. James is the post-game analysis for Jesus' sermon. I'm glad I don't live in that bubble because I don't need four guys up in a booth commenting on my job on Sunday morning or that my microphone cord just slid down my arm. This isn't, I don't want to have to deal with that, but that's what James is. James is the guy sitting in the booth commenting on that Sermon on the Mount. But it doesn't matter if we're talking about James or we're talking about the Sermon on the Mount. Both of them say it's not faith versus works, it is faith and works. Both are important and both are tied together in this. And this was the lesson that Zacchaeus was learning, that he had to learn. Because it wasn't that being a tax collector was wrong, but it was the part where he was taking advantage of others. That was the problem. It was taking more from them than what he should have been collecting. His response is not to change careers, but his response is that he made reparations. He said, I need to do different. I need to be different. So he gives away half of what he has and says, I will repay 4 times anything that I have cheated from anyone. This was the sign that he'd understood what he'd done, and that presumably he was going to go on from there and be different. He had to find a way to do his job differently, to align who he was and the work that he did with the faith that he had in Jesus, so that his job, that part of him, was not eating at his soul. And the benefit of that was that as he was figuring that out, then all of the other harm that he was doing to the others that he was over-collecting from, that he was hurting in process of doing his job, he wasn't going to be doing that anymore. Yeah, probably still collecting taxes, but he wasn't going to be hurting them, causing additional harm in the process of that. Faith and works. Too often we try to separate the faith from the works. And these days we don't often have the conversation of faith versus works, although there are some folks out there that are trying to bring that argument back. We've agreed that faith versus works is not the way to talk about this. But so that we can continue this conflict going forward, we don't talk about faith versus works anymore. We have just siloed everything off to faith over here and works over here. And we say we have this thing that we do now where part of it is really good and healthy, but that extra bit is not, where we say you must have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. That's good. And then, but on top of that, we say, but then, faith is a private matter. We just recreated faith and works. We have our faith things that we do over here that take place on the weekends, that take place when we go on mission trips or to church camps or to retreats, or when we say blessings before meals, so long as there aren't too many people looking at us in the restaurant. We do these things over here. And then we have the rest of our life that we do over here. We have a tendency to keep these things separated from one another. But like I said, this is not a new argument that we've been having. And this is not the first time that we've had to figure out, wait, now we've got to pull these things back together again. Tish Warren writes in her book, Liturgy of the Ordinary, she's talking about the Reformation. So we go back about 500 years or so. And she describes it this way that I really like. The Reformers taught that a farmer may worship God by being a good farmer, and that a parent changing diapers could be as near to Jesus as the Pope. This was a scandal. And it was a scandal because the thought of changing Jack's stinky diapers as being holy work is not something I normally think of. Especially not if you've been having a stomach thing going on recently. Not that he has been, but he has been. but it should be. Because we shouldn't separate these things from one another. Arguably, it's more important that those things be a part of holy work. Too often we say these things of faith over here. As a part of that, we say there are folks that have jobs, that live lives that are completely encompassed by this faith, and we hold them up as the great examples. And the trouble is that the examples we use are determined by every time period you live in. We say those are great, but then everyone else is like, they're still left over here. That's not where we need to be. We don't need jobs that are world-changing. What we need are lives that are changing, and that but that we lead changing lives in our jobs. That's what our goal should be. The holy work is where we align our lives with Christ in all things that we do, faith or work, combined together, so that that soul-leading part of it can go away, so that we know how to take care of that and we can get over that. Look again at Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, who was probably still a tax collector, but now he also knew what God wanted him to do. God's mission for him was to be as complete as Zacchaeus as he could be as a tax collector. That meant that he didn't have to take advantage of others anymore, that he could show compassion, he could show mercy as needed, he could show justice as needed. He didn't have to, the thing about tax collectors is that there was so much that they were required to take in the form of taxes from folks, and that anything that they could get out of them by hook or by crook was fair game. He didn't have to go that far anymore and still be fine and still do good. The changes he could make even could have been just as simple as smiling at people walking down the road, because they would have gone to the other side of the street, if not the other side of the city, anytime they saw him, because that's not who they wanted to be around. His goal wasn't to be the best that he could be at his job, but to be a complete person of faith who was also a tax collector, and that faith shows in how he does his job. This time of year, it's tempting to start new things, but before we start something new, look for what is eating at your soul. Look for what is controlling your thoughts and your actions, and the things that you don't like, that you're afraid of, or you just don't like how they make you think, or the things that it leads you to. Tish Warren tells a story of a woman named Dee, who she worked at this job that she described as the worst job that she has ever had. She was working as an appointment scheduler in a big medical complex. Y'all didn't have to spend time talking to folks that make appointments in doctor's offices. You can imagine how thankless a job that is a lot of times, right? There's a reason why Warren calls it the worst job that she ever had. But she said in there is this woman named Dee, who was good to work with. She was pleasant to be around. She got along with folks. She put pictures of her family up on the walls of her cubicle. She knew how to talk to the folks that really needed the help to try and navigate all of this stuff, and how to get through the folks who were just seeking out attention. And the best part, though, because you can imagine, like, we all have to go to the doctor at some point for checkups, right? But you can imagine most of the calls that they would receive are folks who are not calling for their annual checkup. They're calling because something is wrong. And you can imagine how hearing those stories would eat at you. Yet somehow they didn't eat at Dee. She managed to get through all of that and do her job wonderfully well with an amount of compassion that was hard for anyone else to do. She could have let that control her, what she dealt with on a day in and day out, and that could have controlled her life. It would have been easy to do. It's why that can be such a terrible job, such a hard job to do. She accepted those parts of her job, but they didn't have to control her. Warren describes how she put the pictures up so she would remember her family. She couldn't control a lot of it, but she could remember the things that were important as she was going about this work that she was doing. And that's the key. How do we find those ways that help us to keep things focused in the right place? Zacchaeus couldn't do anything about the need to collect someone's taxes, but he didn't have to extort them. Jesus gives us permission to be new, even if that doesn't change a lot of what we do. What he says, though, is lay your burdens on me so that they don't control you. Then look at what we can do instead. Now, what we may do in response may not be repaying someone 4 times like what Zacchaeus did. But it might be a lot more like what Dee did, just putting up some pictures in her office so she could keep memory of what's important, so she wouldn't let the other things take control of her. Maybe even like some friends of mine that I had who, if you were to know their story, you would say, why are they not just a complete and total mess every morning when they get up? And yet every morning when they get up, and I know they do this because they've told me this, that they have to decide that they are going to be okay, that they're going to be thankful, that they're going to have gratitude, that they're going to put a smile on their face, even if they don't always want to do it. And there's one of them in particular that you could not tell that life has been hard because she's got a bright, bubbly personality. Tell you push her a little bit, and you figure out she's got a spine of steel, but she has to make that choice every day. That those are not going to be the things that control me. That it's her faith that she lives out that sets her on the right path. The key is that we don't separate our faith from our work. Our faith is our work is our faith. Sometimes that means big changes in life, but often it just means smaller changes that address the things that are eating at us on a day-to-day basis. That's hard work, though. But it is worth it. It does take time to do to get there, but we can get there. Take a look as you go this week, and the next couple weeks even, and when those things come up, just kind of keep a tally of those things that eat at us. And as necessary, if you feel them, as you feel them begin to take on more and more control, just simply say, Jesus, don't let these things control me. That may not work the first 100 times that you do it, but it's a practice to get into. I need a visual part of that, so in my mind, whenever I say that, I'm swiping left, like I'm deleting email off my phone. It doesn't always work, but it's a start. And the more we practice at that, the more we realize these things don't have to control us. That, remember the one who we're saying, take these things from us, don't let these things control me. They can help us come through that. And then as we practice that more, we'll begin to see the new ways through. They'll begin to help us find the ways how we overcome these things before they become problems in the future. Nothing else may change about the work that we do. Sometimes life is still going to be the way life is going to be, but the hard parts don't have to be the things that control us every day. But we remember where it is that we gain our strength, who it is that we turn those things over to, and who it will be that will help us to overcome them now and in the future. Let us be a people as we go out into this new year who share that hope and that promise with a world that is full of all of that soul eating right now. Let us be a people who can share that light so that it can be overcome. Let us go and do this all in Christ's name. Amen.